Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. I'm your host, Bull. We've already taken a look at NC State's offense and defense on Monday and Tuesday. All those film breakdowns are out. Actually, we accidentally sent out NC State's defensive film last night for like 20 or 30 minutes, something like that. So some of y'all did get to enjoy that. And if y'all would like to see that re-released out to the public, just that one only, then just let me know down in the comment section. If we get enough comments, then I will actually release that out so that y'all can take a look at it. But today, being Wednesday, it's time for us to take a look at the 7 keys to victory for our volunteers. And as always, y'all, thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. Thank you so much for liking and all of the support that we've gotten just as far as people being members, joining this channel. Also, everyone that's been donating to this channel by scanning the Cash App QR code, wherever that is on the screen. We appreciate the support so much. As always, please make sure to like and subscribe. Let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, now it's time for our 7 keys to victory for our volunteers. Number one is going to be identification. I'm talking specifically about the offense. NC State runs that 3-3-5, so they can do a whole lot of different things. They can be very multiple with where the pressure is coming from, whether we're passing the football or if we are running it. So we have to understand up front, whether it's just with the offensive line, if it's with our tight ends, if it's with the running backs, everyone needs to know what gap they're supposed to be blocking or who they're supposed to be blocking on any given play. As long as I think, we do that, and obviously Nico is going to have to be on the same page with that as well. But as long as we can do that, I think that we will be able to establish some dominance just because if we know who to block, then we will be able to block them. It's not like they're going to be able to outmatch us physically by any means. I think we have a very strong upper hand as far as that goes. Now, kind of touching back on with Nico, he's going to have to ID what they're doing, as far as the coverage goes, but also we run a whole lot of RPOs, things like that. And they do some funky things inside of their 3-3-5 scheme. I've seen a lot of them, the D line goes one way, linebackers go the whole other way. So I think that we can create some really nice running lanes from that, and some of that will come off of the RPO. So just kind of reading, just kind of handing off whenever you need to. Also, if we're doing, zone reads, whatever quarterback options, I think that Nico can find some spots to run in, and he's just going to have to be able to ID that part of it. But also down the field, they'll have, three secondary people deep, just kind of, showing that 3-high look. Sometimes they will actually run a cover 3 out of that. Other times they'll switch to some other stuff. So you have to kind of recognize what's going on pre-snap, but then also post-snap, you've got to see where they're moving to and get that figured out. If we can just do that alone, then Tennessee's going to put up some phenomenal numbers on offense, and I think that we'll have a ton of success. Number two is going to be to establish the run. This is kind of going back to that 3-3-5. There's going to be some natural running lanes there. And again, with their D-line kind of going to one side, seeing their linebackers going to the other side, I don't know if that's 100% by design or if somebody was just wrong. But if they were wrong, then they've been wrong on a lot of plays through a lot of games that I've watched with them. So again, I think that we will be able to run, especially with some of that gap scheme stuff, pulling the tight ends, pulling the tackles, all of that. We should find some really big creases in lanes. But if we can establish that running game early, all of a sudden, with all of the pieces that they have, linebackers, secondary pieces, that they can move all over the football field. If we can get them more dedicated to the box area, then now we're going over the top. Now we're taking big shot plays. And I think that the game could really break wide open from that perspective, as long as we can establish that run early on in this football game. Number three is going to be for Nico, and this is going to be to take what's there. What I mean by that is, especially early on in this game with that 3-high look, I think NC State might just try to, force us to dink and dunk the football all the way down the field and establish a really long drive, and then kind of try to tighten up their coverage as we get into the red zone. I don't know how long that's going to last, just because I feel like we will be gashing them so much, running the football if they do that. But Nico has to stay patient, and it's not just with that, but also whenever you're talking about, some of those quarterback reads, things like that, RPOs, we have to make sure that we are reading things correctly and taking what they're giving to us, because they can kind of move all over the place. But if we read that right, okay, if we can read where they're at correctly on all those option plays, we are going to put them in a terrible, terrible spot. And they have not been good stopping, RPOs, stopping quarterbacks that can run on some of those read options. They have not done well with that over the past couple of seasons as I've been watching film on their defense. So we have to make sure that we are taking what they're giving to us. And that, to me, will be the sign that we're going to have a very, very dominant day. And at number four, we have to have job focus. This is just talking about defense. And what I mean here is on offense, they do a ton of misdirection stuff. You'll see the offensive line go this way. The skill guys might go the other way. So they pretty much split the field up into halves. If you're playing on one half of the field, you've got to do your assignment first. And then on the other side, exact same thing. Don't really try to play hero ball. Don't try to make too many plays. Just do what you are supposed to do. Also, with some of their key skill guys, okay, like KC Concepcion, that they move all over. You have to understand down and distance, exactly where he's lined up at to know kind of what they're going to be trying to do. I know that's going to be a really big point of emphasis for this defense. And several of our fans have been asking about KC. He is really good, but we've done well versus those types of wide receivers that the offense likes to move all over the place. And the reason that we've done well versus them is because our players have done a good job of just, executing their jobs and just being laser focused with that. But I'm sure that we will do that at a really high level coming up on Saturday. And at number 5, it's going to be a really big one, but it's also very obvious. And it's just the tackle because, again, they like to get the football in their playmakers' hands early and often and, very close to the line of scrimmage. Just dump it off to them and let them make some plays. It's going to be so important for us to come up and make sound fundamental tackles. Don't let a play that, starts off 2 yards up the field, past the line of scrimmage. Don't let that turn into 20 or 30-yard gain. And as long as we can do that, I think that we'll limit a lot of what they like to do. I don't see them having too much success down the field, but we'll touch on that a little bit more after we get done with these keys. So number 6 is going to be to hit Grayson. And we know that our entire front seven on defense is going to be dominant in this game. I don't think that they can block us at all. It's not just about getting the sacks, which of course that's great, but also just hitting him over and over and over again. I've seen him not just with NC State last weekend versus Western Carolina, but in some of his other film where, whenever he's getting hit, he starts getting happy feet. He starts kind of get flustered, and he's not as accurate. He's not as good of a quarterback whenever you do that to him. I think that this will be the first time that he gets to see that pretty much on an all-the-time basis. I just think it's going to be very, very difficult for NC State to keep our front away from him. But that's going to be their job, is to make sure that he's uncomfortable inside of that pocket early on and often in this game. And number 7 is going to be to watch the trick plays, especially if we get up early on NC State. Now, I've listened to their coaches speak. I've listened to some of their players speak. And the, players sound pretty confident, but the coaches, you can tell they're already kind of talking about, well, this is not an ACC game. We know that things are different now with the 12-team playoff. This is really all about winning our conference. So I can tell that they are, a little bit afraid of what Tennessee might do. As a matter of fact, I think that they know what Tennessee is about to do. The offense is going to put up points. They're going to feel the pressure. So we have to watch those trick plays and not even just, necessarily going for it straight up on 4th down, but watch the fake punts. Also watch some onside kicks that might do that. But NC State's offense pretty much runs trick plays in every single game. I saw them run some versus Western Carolina last week. And so if they run some versus them, that they're going to run some versus us. And we just had to make sure, again, just kind of going back to key number 4, that we're focusing on our job and just staying locked in. Because if we don't do that, especially with some of the younger players like Boo Carter, if he's not focused on just doing his job, then they can hit us big on some of those trick plays. So that's going to be my final key for this game. All right, now let's talk about how I think this game is going to go for our Tennessee Volunteers. Number 1, this is going to be a really big test, in my opinion, because it is a road game, even though it's a neutral site. We've played well at neutral sites, but this is going to be big for Nico. It's going to be big for, the entire season moving forward. I've seen so many people talking about what's the most important game on our schedule. And I mean, I know this is cliche, we hear it all the time, but the most important game is the next game because we need to win every single one of them. We cannot come in and lose this football game and think that we're going to have a chance to make the playoffs because we have a gauntlet coming up after this one. So we have to take this one very seriously. And I hope that our players are going to come in and not be overconfident. I don't think that that's going to happen, but we got to come out with our hair on fire because I know the NC State will. They're hearing what, everyone is saying inside of the media. No one's really picking NC State. I think we're favored at like 7.5 at this point. That number is going to rise as we get closer to kickoff. I think that Tennessee is the better team overall, but NC State doesn't know that. They're going to come out with a point to prove, especially based off of what they did last weekend versus Western Carolina. They just did not have their best outing. So expect for them to be laser focused, but we are going to have to come in laser focused as well on the road and just take care of business early on in this one. So I think that, the offense wants to get the football first. If we do get the football first, I think that we go straight down the field. We score like a knife through pretty much water. I don't think that they will have very much resistance for our defense. We talked some about maybe they'll give us some 3-high looks early on and kind of force us to dink and dunk down the field. But really what's going to end up happening, I believe, is we're going to run the ball on them a lot and force them to have to bring some guys up into the box. And as soon as they do that, I think that the game pretty much is going to be over with because we're going to be able to throw the ball over their heads all day long. I do not think that their secondary can stick with our wide receivers. We have way too many weapons. NC State, I've watched some of their stuff and listened to some of their fans. And, they feel very confident about the skill position guys that they have. And they should because they have some really good ones. But I don't think anyone fully understands, from their side, just how many we have. You know what I'm saying? I'm just talking about with their fans. Of course, I know that their team knows because I kind of heard them talking about it. we've got a whole lot of those guys. Like they have two or three. We've got like 10 of them, right? And we see that type of stuff all the time. We'll get to the defense here in just a second. But I think once it settles into a game, Tennessee is going to be able to run the football on NC State pretty much at will. I think we could rush for close to 250 yards in this one. I know that sounds like a really big number, but I just don't see them being able to stop us with that 3-3-5 scheme just because we talked about this some yesterday. They don't have really big bodies up front. That's what we've struggled with the most versus those, three-man fronts is when you have guys that are 300 pounds plus that are also twitchy. They've got some guys that are close to 300, but they're not the same caliber of what we've seen in the past. And we've got a veteran offensive line that's seen it several times, so they understand what to do. And I also think that Cooper Mays was part of the problem for us not having as good of a run game versus those 3-3-5 defenses in the past. But he looked absolutely phenomenal versus UT Chattanooga. I mean, he looked like he's going to be an NFL player for sure. So we haven't really talked a whole lot about him, but I think that he's playing at a completely different level. Either way, man, we have a stable of running backs to get downhill. Dylan Sampson has been so impressive, just with what he's done, putting on the weight. I mean, he's running through tackles. He's making people miss, setting his blocks up well, all that good stuff. So I think that they're going to struggle to stop our run game. If you can't stop Tennessee's run game, you have absolutely no chance in the world to beat us unless you get like 15 turnovers or something. So I think that we will be very, very dominant from that perspective, but also just in the passing game. We've got a guy named Holden Stays who went off versus NC State last season whenever he was playing for Notre Dame. We talked about this before. But we actually did his film breakdown versus NC State, and he had 4 catches for 115 yards with 2 touchdowns, averaging 28.8 yards per reception. So I would expect for him to get some touches. Also, Ethan Davis, who I think is probably at this point in the season better than Holden Stays. I think he's going to have a really big day as well. Hopefully, Miles Kitselman can get some targets. So I think that our tight ends are going to be a big time mismatch, nightmare for their defense, just because they are so big. They're also so fast. And playing that 3-3-5, I mean, if you have a linebacker guarding them, I don't think that they can stick with them from an athletic perspective. And then they have smaller linebackers too. They're not going to be able to really physical, they're not going to be able to play physical with our tight ends. And then I also think it's going to be a really big mismatch versus their safeties, or I haven't really seen their nickel player play, but probably versus him too, just because he's going to be a little bit too small, in my opinion. So tight end should have a really big day versus NC State. But also, like we kind of touched on before, our wide receivers should have a ton of success because they're also really big and really fast. And I think that, NC State has struggled versus guys like that, but they've also struggled versus some guys that are a little bit smaller and, kind of like scat back wide receivers, so to speak, like a Squirrel White. I think that he's going to have a really good day. So just expect for our offense to be clicking on all cylinders as long as we can hit on the keys that we touched on for the offense. Now let's talk about if the defense gets the football first and talk about what I see from our defense in this game. So if the defense gets the football first, I think the NC State will try to come out and establish the running game early. It's probably not going to work in their favor. I was not impressed with their offensive line versus Western Carolina at all. Western Carolina was playing on their side of the line of scrimmage a lot. I think they had like 9 tackles for loss or something like that. It was just something that was astronomical. And it didn't make any sense to me, but watching it on film, you understand what's going on there. And, Western Carolina was playing that 3-3-5, and they're still able to kind of get back there. And I wouldn't really say dominate their offensive line, but they were getting the better of them on several plays. So our front, we already know it's serious. We are bigger, stronger, and faster than NC State's offensive line. I think that they are going to absolutely eat if NC State comes out and tries to establish a running game early. They're probably going to end up going 3 and out. And then our offense comes down the field, and like we said, they score. Now we're talking about the second and third drives. I don't know at what point, the second wave of our D-line comes in, but I'll tell y'all the truth. I think that outside of James Pierce, that second group is actually better than the first group. We're talking about Omar Nomalot, Big E playing on the inside. I think that they are actually better than Big O and Bryson East. And I'm not going to say about much, but I think that they are actually more disruptive up front. And then also, does Tyree West come in, to start the game, or is he coming in that second wave? I think that he might be our best strong side D, and he's playing completely and totally different. So whereas NC State would struggle running the football on the first drive, on the second and third drives, I think that they're going to have even less success trying to run the ball. And at that point, Tennessee could be up by, 21 points in the first quarter. I know this sounds like a, pipe dream or, whatever, or I've got on some orange colored glasses, but I'm telling you from watching these film breakdowns, from breaking down this film, from watching a whole bunch of film on NC State offense and defense, this is the way that I can see things playing out. Now, obviously NC State on the second and third drives will start trying to throw the football. They're going to get more into like desperation mode. So that's when we should be able to pin our ears back and get to Grayson and, hit him, start to, make them feel like, okay, we got to do some quick screens, things like that. We'll probably see some trick plays from them in the second or third drive. Hopefully, guys, some of our younger guys like Boo Carter or even, some of our newer guys, whoever it is out there, hopefully they will just do their assignment and not get lulled to sleep whenever a player might look like they're trying to block and they go out for a pass and then they have one of their wide receivers throw it deep to them or run it back, whatever. But that's what's going to be coming. So, as long as we can stay fundamentally sound, then we are going to, I feel like, be up very big, very early on in this game. And also, man, some of those trick plays, we could end up getting some interceptions because you've got guys that aren't quarterbacks trying to throw the ball down the field. If that's what they go to, I mean, that might not be the best look. So I think that for sure our front seven should have a really, really good day. But if I have any questions about our defense, it's going to be number one with that misdirection. We did see a couple of times last weekend, guys like Boo Carter kind of overrunning plays, not getting to the proper run fits all the time. I don't think that he played horrible. This wasn't as good as we thought that it would be, but hopefully he does get that fixed coming into this game because he's going to have to. If you get out of, one gap or, anything, if you miss a gap versus NC State, they can definitely make you pay with the types of schemes that they run. We'll see a whole lot of stretch plays. We'll see a whole lot of outside zone plays. And the cutback is what they're going to be looking for primarily with those plays. So we've, have to make sure that we're doing a really good job, whether we're on the front side of those plays or on the backside with our linebackers, with our safeties, with our star players, just in our run fits to make sure that they can't do that. Also, we will see, several RPOs, things like that. We just have to, again, we have to be on our job. We have to have focus right there. Also, I think that our linebackers could get matched up versus KC. If that happens, I think that we'll have something for it, okay? Because like I had kind of touched on, we've seen several wide receivers, even last season that were very similar to what KC does inside of NC State's offense. And I'm going to rattle off some of their numbers to y'all. So number one, Ricky Purcell, who played at Florida. We all know that he's in the NFL now. He had 6 catches for 43 yards with no touchdowns in that game. Then we also have Xavier Legette. Okay, he played at South Carolina. He had 5 catches for 50 yards. Evan Stewart, who played at Texas A&M. We all know how dynamic and explosive he is. 4 catches for 48 yards. None of those players had any touchdowns. Now let's talk about Luther Burden, who I actually, compared KC to earlier in this week. He had 4 catches for 26 yards and he did have 1 touchdown. So players like that, we do scheme well for. It's just going to be all about executing those schemes. I also kind of feel like this is a game that maybe Will Brooks, I mean, he could play well in, I know I keep on talking about him, but I'm curious to see how he performs in coverage playing at safety. I don't think that I don't know if he's cut out for that, just because we can kind of go back to the Georgia game. We didn't do well versus their wide receivers. I think they had 2 guys that had a total of 3 touchdowns versus us. And that was a game that we had several of our starters out, at star, at safety, at corner. A lot of guys didn't play in that game. So that's a part of the reason for it. But Will Brooks was playing at the star position. I think he did really good in run support. And maybe he didn't look as bad in coverage because we had to kind of switch our scheme up some just to kind of account for him in pass coverage. So things like that do kind of concern me. I would not be shocked to see Kobe Thomas start this game. Or, maybe Will Brooks gets to start, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this is the game where Kobe Thomas ends up, turning himself into the full-time starter moving forward for the rest of the year. But outside of that, I think that our secondary is going to do a really good job in coverage. People are, just kind of pointing at our secondary as the weak spot on our entire team, especially on defense. And I would say that they probably are. I think that that's fair just because the front seven is going to be so strong. But whenever you talk about guys like Jermon McCoy transferring in from Oregon State, we did the film breakdown on him versus Washington. Go back and look at the numbers for Washington's wide receivers and their tight end in that game. I think they had 3 or 4 guys, just as far as pass catchers, that went on to the NFL last season. But everyone that he guarded, I mean, he shut them down. I think that he held Rome a doomsday to maybe like 2 catches total. It was, or it might have just been 1. I think it was 1 like at the very, very end of the game for like 5 or 6, maybe 9 or 10 yards, something like that. It was for a first down. But outside of that, he really shut all those guys down. So he's a really good player. I think that he is probably one of the best cornerbacks in the entire country. People aren't talking about him just yet, but towards the end of the season, trust me, that will be a storyline. People are going to be talking about him. But then we also have Ricky Gibson, who I think is just as good as Jermon McCoy. I mean, they've both been shut down guys. So on the outside, we should be perfectly fine. We should be able to run some different coverages with those 2 guys. Hopefully it's not going to be super basic stuff, cover three and all that. But I think that they do a really nice job in that as well. Now, again, talking about the star position, we've got some kind of like new guys there. And I think that they're physically capable to get things done. It's just going to be about not kind of getting confused in some of the different, formations and sets and plays that NC State will present to them because I haven't seen a whole lot of that. They're going to get a crash course on it throughout, this entire week. But it's different kind of seeing the stuff in person because it's happening so fast. So a little bit concerned there, but I think that they will hold their own. Again, we're probably going to scheme around those guys. Now, this is where it would maybe be beneficial to have Will Brooks at playing at safety because he's going to know what to do. I just don't know how physically capable he's going to be, able to kind of slow their guys down as they're kind of moving in some routes down the field. But I think that Andre Turrentine, he's another veteran playing at safety. He should be just fine. He looked really good coming up, being physical versus Western Carolina. That was my only real question. But in coverage, he's looked great pretty much since he's been playing with us. So I think that our secondary is going to be fine. As far as the starters go, with some of the guys that come in off the bench, Jordan Matthews, he's just got to stay on top of the routes. As long as he does that, he's fine. Come up. It's better and it's easier to come up and make the plays than it is to, try to make a play over your head. I think that J-Mac looked good last weekend. So I think that he's going to be just fine this weekend as well. I think we've got some guys with some good size, some good length that are really good athletes. It's just, again, going to be all about being in the right spots at the right times, not getting confused. As long as we don't do that, I think that we will limit what their wide receivers are going to try to do to us in this game. But at the end of the day, y'all, I think that this is one that Tennessee wins pretty big. And I would say by 20 points or more. I know that that might sound, a little bit rich to some people. But again, if you go back, if you watch everything, and if it plays out about the way that I think that it will, of course, it's not going to be perfect. Will we have some turnovers in this game? I think it's very possible. But I also feel like we will probably turn the football over, from NC State more than they will from us. Obviously, that's going to be one of the key maxims. You've got to take care of the football, and I definitely think that we will do that in this game. I just don't see them being able to really slow down what we do on offense, and I don't see them having a ton of success versus us on versus our defense. They might have some, but I don't think it's going to be enough to keep this one close. Like I said, we'll probably be up pretty big in the early portions of that game. Then NC State starts to get desperate. So I could definitely see us winning this one by 20 or more points. Y'all let me know y'all's thoughts down in the comments section. And as always, please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. We'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.